All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sky. Yes, this is the one I'd like to start off with. Kind of hard to talk about people after you've seen such a riveting and deep emotional tie with animals, isn't it? Right? I was sitting there thinking, how am I going to continue on that talk when my heart is going out to all these animals? I don't even want to think about myself anymore. But the reality is I do want to share one thing, and it starts with this picture. Again, coming back to nature. What do you see when you think about this picture? What are some emotions that come with it? Freedom, excellence. That's the first thing that came to my mind too. What else? Photoshop, true. It could be Photoshop. In our generation, it can definitely be Photoshop. It is also something, for me, it represents deep satisfaction, contentment, an absolute moment of joy. When you are able to connect with nature, when you are able to be on top of a mountain, when you're connecting with animals, that feeling in your stomach, that emotion that churns out, it's absolute indescribable. And I wanted to share this because, and before I even continue, maybe a little bit about myself. I am Chinese. I look Chinese, don't I? Maybe a little bit. But I grew up in Ghana in West Africa. So we have a little bit of an African theme going on down there. I think Sean has probably seen more wild animals live close to him than I have in 16 years of living in Africa. But I grew up living in slum areas. My parents were educators. They went over to Africa in the 80s, and they decided to live as the poor do if you work with the poor. And so live like a poor person we did. But it was very humbling, and it was extremely inspiring, because people that we met, the things that we do, and the experiences that I went through have shaped the decisions and the way that I think, and have really led me to doing the work that I do today. Now, 10 years ago, I moved back to Hong Kong, and that's where I realized that we are more on this. Now, how many of you have seen this? Raise of hands. A version of this, some sort of cartoon version of this. I think that this is a reality for most of us young people in Hong Kong. We can talk a lot about, dreams, and we can talk a lot about being inspired to do a lot of great things. But the reality, and we see this every day because we work with young people, the reality is this: the whole concept of winning at the starting line. Because a lot of the young people that we work with will look at something like this, and it defines where they are. Well, my parents weren't able to afford the fact that I could have an amazing education to go to overseas, and so therefore I'm already starting last. Or, my parents weren't really able to allow me to do this or that, and so therefore I'm not able to do what I can do. Or maybe I didn't have as many life experiences growing up. I just grew up in Hong Kong. I'm just, Andy, who was born in Hong Kong, grew up in Hong Kong, and never did anything else. So I'm definitely way at the back of the line. In fact, I think this type of societal pressure is so high for every one of us, you and me sitting here, and I think we can all pretend and just smile and, let it roll off our backs. But the reality, if we ask ourselves deep inside, we're all going through this, and we're all asking the questions about this. And the reality also is that when we look at a situation like this in Hong Kong, most of us didn't really have a choice. Because when we were already born into a society that looks into this. We are already living in a society. In fact, I was talking to a friend the other day. She's not married. She has no children. And she was saying, when I have a kid, I'm going to do this and this and this. I'm definitely going to enroll them in this and this and this. And they're definitely not going to be doing these things that I'm doing now. Why? Because I think there's a better thing that they can do. And I looked at her and I goes, but you don't even have a kid yet. Your kid's not even born. And I just started thinking, well, if I was her kid that hasn't even been born yet, I'm definitely sitting on this and looking at this and saying, this is my reality. But the reality is also that this doesn't have to be your reality. A famous New Zealand mountaineer, Sir Edmund Hillary, once said, the mountains are not the things that we are conquering. It's actually ourselves. Ourselves are the ones that we are conquering. And that is actually you. We talk about the untapped potential. We talked about the unknown capacity. I think the biggest barriers to us as young people to really tap into the potential that we're able to do, to dream, is actually ourselves. Because we're wrapped up into this society and the way that everyone thinks, that we haven't even started walking and we're already doing this. We're going backwards. Why? And so I think it's really important for us to think about how we're thinking about things, first of all, how we interact with the rest of the world with these thoughts, and finally, when we've processed our thoughts, what we're actually going to put in action to do. And I'm a pragmatic person, so bear with me. I think the first and most important thing that I've learned is actually being very honest with yourself and saying, who are you? I am. So take a minute, or maybe 10 seconds, and think about it. How would you answer this in all honesty? Are you going to say that I'm a daring person? Or are you going to say, I'm somebody who's still learning? Are you going to say, I'm an entrepreneur? Or are you going to say, oh, I'm somebody who has ideas, but I'm not really sure where to put them yet? But you know what? Either one of those things is okay. I want to share a story of a young guy that I met a couple years. I went back to Ghana to visit my parents. We're going into this village, probably about 10 hours north of Accra, which is the capital city. After a really long, bumpy road, we get into this village and we sit down with the village chiefs. This is the conversation we're having. My dad was trying to figure out whether or not we could start a vocational training school in this village in northern Ghana. So you have all the chiefs sitting around in a circle. Everyone is, talking about the pros and cons. And from nowhere, there was a voice that said, well, I think that you really should be going to the next village because there's really nothing to educate over here. And my dad and I look at it and we're like, first of all, where is this voice coming from? And second of all, what is this person talking about? Do you know who it was? We looked down. We were sitting on benches. We looked down at the benches, and there was a little young man. He was completely paralyzed from the waist down. In fact, it looked like he had cerebral palsy because his legs were all deformed. I didn't take a picture of him because I thought it would be disrespectful, so sorry, no images here. We found out later that when he was 3 years old, he was placed into a boiling pot of water by mistake. And so because of that, he lost all function from his lower legs down. He was tossed aside, and he spent most of his life, his key developmental years, crawling around the village on his 2 hands. And the only place that he could really hang out was under the benches of the chiefs where they sat and had their key conversations. I looked at this young man and I thought to myself, this guy has a voice. He has such a great mind, and he has so much confidence, especially in the way he talked. And I went up to him with a translator. Unfortunately, I don't speak the local tribe language there, and I asked him later, I was like, what gave you such confidence, to be able to have this conversation and even chime in when there's a foreigner coming in to talk to your chiefs? And he said, I'm a realist. I've spent my entire life on the floor, under these benches. And I know where I am, but I also know because I've spent my entire life under these benches, I know exactly what I'm saying. And those chiefs don't know what they're saying. They just want your money, so they want you to build your school in this village and not the next one. This kid had so much capacity because he knew exactly who he was. He knew what his limitations was. And from that point onwards, he made very decisive steps to be a part of this community that he was actually shunned on and basically not really looked at. But because of his ability to know where exactly he stood, he became a very integral part of this community. So self-acknowledgement and knowing where you are and being realist about what your strengths are and what your abilities are, and being really real and honest about, what it is that you want. That is the first step. So I mentioned that the second thing is not just thinking about yourself, but also how you interact with others. Did you know that in Hong Kong, 70%, there was a study that was done, 70% of secondary school students are actually being bullied by their classmates today? How horrifying is that? That means that majority of us sitting in this room have been bullied once in our life. And not just by somebody who was older than us, by our peers. What does that tell you about the way that we are learning from each other, and the way that we are interacting with each other, and the way that we're getting information from one another? Maybe what we're doing is we're bullying others in order to get information for ourselves. Maybe we're putting down other people so that we can do better or get more information for ourselves. Now, I know that it's very difficult to think about ourselves in this honest way, but what if we're able to learn and be open as much as possible, to be supportive of one another, to be open to share what you know to others so that others can also share to you, to be kind to others so that others can also be kind to you. And from that first point of knowing your own strengths and knowing your own weaknesses, moving then to interacting with other people in that very honest and very true way, your true self and your capacity within starts coming out. I want to share a story, maybe coming back a little bit to Hong Kong. I've had the privilege working in Hong Kong with a lot of extremely talented young people. A lot of these young people probably don't get into university like yourselves. They go through and suffer through DSCs, like many of you might have, but they don't end up getting into university. But they are very, very happy. And I want to share a story of one young man with you, because I believe that he not only thought about the realities of his situation, dreamed a big dream, and then made very positive steps towards something for his future. I met Jay maybe about 6 years ago. He's probably still about 14, 15 at that time. So he's now graduated. And he was part of one of our programs that we went to the school to teach circus performance arts, just as a hobby. Now, Jay was just a young man who really was trying to figure out what was happening in his life, was really focused on trying to study because there's a lot of pressure. Everything that I talked about in the previous slide was a reality for him. And he took this class because it was something that he could relieve himself. It was a hobby that he could learn from. It was a hobby that he could just do something else with. And Jay was somebody who was just an ordinary Jay. He didn't think about wildlife in Africa. He didn't have the chance to. But what he wanted was, he actually really wanted to help people that are around him. And when he started playing with the juggling stuff, he started doing a lot of performances. He started going into a lot of the community through the program and starting to connect with lots of different people. And when he graduated, he made a very conscious decision. He made a decision to use what he had learned through his hobby and actually make it into a career for the purposes of helping other young people and reaching other young people that were exactly like himself. And we asked him, well, conventionally in Hong Kong, if you want to help other people, if you want to go into youth work, what would you do? You'd go into social work, right? Or you go and get a counseling degree. Or at the very least, just go get a degree, right? So that you'll be credible, so that you can work in an NGO, so that you can make money and you can support your family, while, yes, helping people. And Jay was very clear in his answer. He said, I would like to work for you guys, because that's going to be my job. Because I know already for a fact that I don't need to go through this conventional route, that I can take a different way and I can still achieve the things that I want to do with my strengths and with the talents and with the desire that I want to do. So Jay today is one of our key trainers. He goes to about 5 to 6 schools and he trains 30 to Well, every school has about 20 kids, so if it's 6 schools, he's reaching about 100 kids just on his own. And he's somebody who's fulfilling this dream way bigger than if he had decided to go the convention route and wait until he studied through social work and then try and get some work experience. But he's already doing what he wants to do right here and right now. And, you know, I think that one of the best things that we can do in this community and in this day and age is to actually try and take the risk that we don't have to go the conventional route. We don't all have to be entrepreneurs and start our own organization, but there's so many ways to be non-conventional in your route. It's just a matter of really digging deep, as the other speakers have been saying, and really finding and appreciating where you are and where your starting point, and then moving forward in that. And I just want to take a minute and look around you, look around the people that are next to you. Yeah? The people that are around you are the people who are your best supporters, because you're all in this in a lot of ways. You are here in the same boat. You're all looking forward to the same things. You're all wanting to develop. You're all wanting to go somewhere. You're all wanting to make a difference. You're all wanting to learn. And that process of really being honest with yourself, of thinking through your thoughts of how to interact and be kind and be somebody that's influential to somebody else in your life, and trying to take the non-conventional route without having to, you know, have the kickback to that. All of it is so much easier if you're doing it with a friend, if you're doing it with somebody else that's around you. So support one another, talk to each other, and you know, when you actually graduate out of school and you're coming out and you're doing work, our generation can be a good example of collaborating well with one another. And I hope to see more of that in the coming years. Thank you.